Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Riot Lunch and Learn series, the place where we spotlight Riot sponsors and partners. I'm Jen Morgan. I'm the Virginia program lead for Riot. I have a couple of quick reminders for the folks online and for the folks who are participating in the room today. We are running a hybrid event. So we have a room full of folks as well as those of you who are joining us online. Just as an FYI, this event is being recorded and we will be posting it to Riot's YouTube channel after the event. If you have any questions during the presentation, please try to hold them till the end. If you are attending virtually, please put those in the chat and then I will read them aloud to our presenters at the end of the presentation. We also ask that you try to stay muted if possible and maintain as much, try to quiet as much background noise as possible, and all that jazz. So today we have Cody, Rupert, and Mark with Device Solutions to give us an overview of project management and leadership at Device Solutions. So I'll turn it over to you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our presentation for all those in the room and those online. So like I said, today we're going to take you through kind of steering the ship, leadership and project management at Device Solutions. What we want to do is kind of give you guys an overview as to kind of our approach to project management within the industry and kind of share with you some of our experiences, and then we'll kind of open it up at the end for kind of any questions. So before we start, I'll just quickly introduce you to the team. Good start. Can you do next slide for me? Okay, so myself, Rupert Kilburn. So I'm probably the newest member of the team here. I'm the Director of Project Management here at Device Solutions. I've got quite a unique background that kind of 6 months ago, I was a British Army infantry officer. So I've moved countries, moved over to the US and landed myself a really good role in a really great team, but within the Internet of Things industry, something that I had no experience of prior. So what I hope to share with you today is how kind of my previous experience and my previous life has helped me kind of look at the project management solution that we offer to our clients and kind of give a different spin to it.
I'm Mark Benez. I've been with Device Solutions now 10 years. About the last 7 been doing project management. Before that, I spent 13 years in the defense industry as a software developer and a product team lead.
We've got Tony in the back here.
Hi, I'm Tony Samarco. I'm also the Director of Product Technology Strategy, and I act as a PM on occasion and primarily been focused on government projects in conjunction with WRC and Riot.
Hey, everybody, I'm Cody. I graduated from NC State in 22. And during 22, I was an intern here as a project management intern under Mark. And I've been full-time since the beginning of 2023. I'm also studying to get a degree in computer engineering so I can learn a little bit more about what we do here. And then we've got Dan.
I'm Dan Lash. I'm the guy who couldn't find a professional profile picture. So that's a lighthouse in Wilmington. Anyway, I've been in the industry a long time, primarily larger companies. So I've been here 3 years, kind of enjoying the small company atmosphere.
Okay. So we've got a great project management team here that kind of bring different solutions, and kind of what we wanted to share with you is kind of our approach to project management. So we'll start with a quick kind of overview as to, for those of you that don't know us well already, kind of who we are at Device Solutions and the solutions that we offer for our clients. And then we've kind of broken it down into almost kind of 3 pillars of project management. I'll talk to you about kind of my leadership experience and what we see as kind of leadership in project managers at Device Solutions. And then Cody will talk you through kind of how we take our leadership model and pull that into the kind of communication side of things with our clients and our engineers. And then Mark will then look at how we put all that together and give our customers the best experience that we can offer as we create those devices. So without further ado.
So this is what we do. So we design custom wireless low power devices. So Wi-Fi, LoRa, cellular, you name it. That's our area of expertise. Most of our devices go out into the field for a long time. So we know the importance of power consumption, making sure your devices stay healthy for a real long time. We love working with innovators because our team is, we stay abreast with all the newest technologies, and innovators are looking for new products. So it's a nice marriage there. We have a lot of fun with innovators. So yeah, I've got these props here. Sometimes when we tell people we design devices, they think of the outside, pretty box. That's not, although that's nice, it's not really what we specialize in. So as I'm sure many of you in the IoT space know, we design on designing the actual PCBAs. So that's, most of our products look something in these pictures, but really, our devices, it's all about data, right? So measuring things, environmental factors and things like gas monitoring, volatile organic compounds, asset tracking. Basically, if it needs data, our devices can measure and communicate. So this is our typical project framework. So we typically start at a scope phase where we learn about the project objectives, kind of iron out any project details, remove any ambiguities about what's expected from the client. Then we move on to the feasibility phase. At this point, we look at the economic, technical, and logistical feasibility of the product to make sure that it still makes sense before we spend any more money, getting into the weeds of the development. This is the next step is the design phase, which is the real fun part when we start to engage the engineers in that room over there. And they start to do what they're doing now, which is looking at the nuts and bolts and focusing on the real cool development work. The fun doesn't stop there though, because as you guys all know, compliance is important, and manufacturing is also extremely important. So we're happy to assist in making sure you guys are able to pass any certification you need and help make sure that your devices can be made in mass production. So I want to give a special shout out to Riot. Thanks for hosting this, Jen, and the rest of the Riot team. I know we've done a lot of work in the past. Tony in the back there has had a lot of history along with the folks in the front office and some of the engineers in the building. I think they've been working with Tom since the 90s. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, so there's a long history there. And then Riot started in 2014 and Device Solutions was one of the first 7 to sponsor. So we've been there since, I know Tony likes to say since the beginning. I think we even did an accelerator program, even though we weren't a startup at that point in 2014. We used it as an opportunity to do a self-examination of our Celio value proposition, which Celio is our own internal product. Tony's kind of the mastermind behind that, but he's too humble to tell you. So yeah, we also just a shout out to all of our partners that have helped us get here and make this possible. So thank you, Riot. So now I'll turn it over to Rupert to talk about leadership.
So yeah, we'll get into kind of the meat of the presentation now. And like I said at the start, those kind of 3 pillars is to kind of our approach to project management. I think the first thing that I realized coming into this team is that we kind of see the project managers as project leaders rather than just the kind of management. So on reflecting on this over the last few months of coming into this industry, I kind of look at it in 2 things. The first thing is we're leading high performance individuals. By that I mean, and I often refer to the engineers that I work with, who I have to constantly get them to explain things to me in a dumbed down format as kind of the geniuses and the hyper intelligent, hyper specialized at what they do. And when you're leading these individuals, it comes down to 3 things. The first is humility. And by that, I mean, knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. And I think as a project manager, your role isn't just to know everything, but it's to know who knows that information about that thing. So when you come up with some friction or a problem, you know who the person is that you can talk to that can help you solve that problem. In order to do that, you need really good situational awareness. You need to balance that humility with an understanding of what that engineer is working on and the complexities of that project, and also the situational awareness of what the client requires in that project. And we'll come on to that later as to how the project manager is almost the umbrella to that client relation and enabling the engineers to achieve the technical stuff. And we've kind of termed that recently as that soft edge. So that humility and that situational awareness is that understanding of people, but with a hard edge where you really understand the customer deliverables and you can drive that team to enable success. So when we look at leading those high performance individuals, our next step is then how do we build high performance teams? Because when we're designing these products and building these complex items for them, we need to look at how we pull the team together as the project manager and be the kind of conduit in which that operates. Now, the first part of that is energy, and that isn't kind of just being the really enthusiastic person in the room that's bubbly and outgoing, but a lot of that is kind of just walking around as you see when we give you the tour later, walking around the lab, walking around the shop floor, and having those face-to-face interactions with people so that you're often seen as the project manager, and then you kind of build that team within the project that you're working on. The second is urgency. Now, what I don't mean by this is standing over an engineer and being like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. The customer needs this on schedule, but giving that engineer kind of an understanding as to the parameters in which they're operating, and an understanding of the timescale and what it is we're trying to deliver for our clients and customers. And then the biggest part of this is empowerment. And I kind of want to break this down a little bit further as to kind of what empowerment is, because I think a lot of us think, you could tell a software engineer, right, you've got 3 weeks to build this piece of software. Over to you, I've empowered that software engineer. You'll come back in 3 weeks' time and you'll just get a hello world application that looks unbelievably beautiful, but not really what we were after as we were developing the software. So I think we need to really think about empowerment and what empowerment actually is and how we empower our engineers. In order to do that, we need kind of control. And this is definitely where the project manager comes in. And that is setting the conditions and the control measures for that engineer. So they have the situational awareness, that they understand what they need to do, when they need to do it by, and also at times kind of the standard in which they do. I think a lot of people here have worked with engineers or are engineers and know that they'll seek perfection, seek something to be done immaculately and to a great standard. And the kind of intelligence we have in the room, they could build the best thing, but that might not necessarily be what the customer needs at that point. And that control, almost like drawing a box around the project as to, right, this is the time we've got to do it, this is the budget we've got to do in it, and this is what the client wants that project to look like. And that control is really enabled by the project manager. But like I said earlier, we're leading high performance individuals. So in order to have that relationship with your engineers, you need to have a really good culture and a culture of trust. And that kind of sits at the organizational level. So your engineers are empowered because they understand what the client wants and they understand the parameters. And also, as everyone in here will know, the frictions that come with a highly complex project like something we've got in front of us here, but also have the trust in the project managers that they know that they understand their concerns and their frictions, but also represent what the customer is asking and demanding from us. So we can kind of look at leadership and not just have it as kind of a buzzword, but kind of look at maybe a traditional structure where the client tells the project manager what they want and the project manager then directs the engineers to what they want, and then we then build the project as we go forward. Something that we're striving towards and we're looking at how we enable further is actually looking at our project managers and our project leaders as kind of enabling the engineers. So as a leader, you are there providing the support to those engineers. So you give them the information that they need to know about the client, but also you're providing them with the tools, equipment, the time and the space to achieve what they need to achieve. And when they come up with frictions, they should be able to tell you how that impacts the kind of wider client structure and the project as a whole. So if you give your engineers the understanding of what the client needs and the bigger picture of what the client wants, because often what we build is actually a small yet vital part of a larger product. And sometimes we think protecting the engineers from that will actually enable them, whereas I think if you flip that on its head and having an understanding of what the client needs and what we're trying to achieve for our clients means that the project managers can provide that support to the engineers that understand what's going on and what there is around them. And I think that sets us up quite nicely to kind of how we communicate that and our kind of communication going forward.
All right, so now I'll talk about what I've learned about communication here, specifically at Device Solutions. I'm curious, does anybody know where I'm going with this? Has anyone seen this before? Okay. And see a nod from Michael Kosi, who used to be a project manager here. So you're a client, you come to Device Solutions and you say, I need this pretty simple swing built, right? And then if you're not communicating effectively, you're not doing what your due diligence as a project manager, then it can lead to a lot of adverse outcomes. I'll let you go through each of them individually, but most notably, I know people really care about this one. They don't want to get billed for a roller coaster when they want a tire swing. So we don't want to do that. And we found some ways, and I personally can attest to this, that if you adhere to a pretty stringent model of what needs to be communicated and how you do it, then you can at least avoid most of these. I like number 6. I've asked for one of those personally back in the PM room. But yeah, so we try to avoid that. And by doing so, we've developed this DS model, but Rupert will tell you it's the Kilburn model. But they have these 4 main quadrants. And if you start with going through them sequentially, then you'll start to notice that you adhere to this in every interaction. And again, it just minimizes the room for error as a project manager. So first, with speaking the client's language, this doesn't necessarily mean literally speaking the client's language. It means coming to alignment with them. As we all know, when you're doing engineering requirements is arguably the most important step. If you're misaligned from the start, then you're going back to steering the ship. You're gonna be really far off base. But active listening doesn't necessarily mean tell me everything about your product, how you see it being used. While it does include that, it also includes, to me, asking questions, right? Asking clarifying questions, asking the silly, taken for granted questions that you might consider to be understood by everyone in the project team. But I found that it almost never hurts to ask more than enough questions, just so that you can get a stamp of approval and confirm your understanding. So we found that if you adhere to that, then you're at least off to a good start. So then the next step is communicating the client's needs, and this is typically down to engineering, and I don't mean down in the sense of we're not all on the same team here, but more in the next step. So basically, if you've done the first step correctly, then you know exactly what the client needs. You should have an idea of their schedule, their budget, how the product's gonna be used in the end application, and all of the struggles that they're dealing with in their greater product development. So if you understand that, then you can create some actionable tasks. There should be no room for error here. Again, we want to make sure everything's clear, specific. You should use concise language to avoid any ambiguities. And then lastly, if you've done these first two steps correctly, then it makes this step pretty easy, managing milestones and deadlines. As we know, it's dynamic, priorities change, but for the most part, that's if you've done the first two, you can really do the last step. So then it comes to engineer feedback. We know that the engineers, they're on the ground doing the actual heavy lifting from the technical perspective. So they're most adept to speak to the project struggles, right? So that means that project managers, kind of like you were saying, going around, flying around the room, we should be in constant communication and gathering information as far as achievements, challenges. One thing I found important is a great question that I feel you can ask is, what are some risks, if any, that you can see cropping up, even if there aren't any now? That just kind of gets the gears turning on, okay, engineers are focused on this task, I'm gonna get it done, and sure enough, they will. But if you can every once in a while ask to take a step back, what could we run into down the line, then that allows you to think a little bit more forward. And yeah, lastly, oftentimes our engineers come up with solutions, and it's not just solutions to the problems that we already knew existed. If you've done a good job of making sure the engineer is in lockstep with the customer's greater product needs in the end application, then they can kind of think as they develop what it would be like for an end user of their product. And oftentimes I've found that they offer solutions and recommendations that lead to a greater product and a better minimum viable product for our clients. Lastly, we encourage client feedback weekly and sometimes more often. So as we know, innovators, a lot of our clients are innovators and people that are engineers themselves and are emotionally tied to their product. So we want to know their feedback. We want to know what they see is Device Solutions succeeding versus not so much. And we're always happy to incorporate that feedback. As you guys all know, it's engineering. Things change, things are dynamic. We're not scared to redirect, but we can only do that if we're asking for feedback and making sure that the client is happy with what we're doing. So yeah, I guess just I've got a little bit different of a perspective. I'm a year and a couple months out of school, and both all the mentors and other PMs have been doing this for a lot longer. So personally, just to give you a little anecdotal story, when I first came here, I didn't really know. I knew status reports, I knew schedule, budget. That's what I expected. But the whole team leader aspect and all these kind of soft skills that we spent a lot of time talking about, I took those for granted. I didn't do an excellent job at first of adhering to this here communication model, and that led to some inefficiencies early on in project meetings. We weren't being efficient with our time. Roles weren't as clearly understood. But I found that if you can stick to your guns as far as this slide goes and making sure you're doing those constantly, you can lead projects to success. So I think if I can do it, others can do it too. I'll let Mark talk about the customer experience.
All right, so Rupert took us through leadership, Cody took us through communication. Both of those are very important in the customer experience. I'm gonna dive a little bit more into the ideal customer experience and how it benefits both device solutions and the customer themselves. Our goal as the project manager, we're really the advocate for the customer. And we need to paint a clear picture of what the status of the project is, where it's going, why we ran into any speed bumps or anything like that. So really letting them know exactly what's going on at all times. Two of the main things are avoiding surprises at all costs. What we don't want to do is late in the game, let them know that, hey, something's gone drastically wrong, and then it's too late to fix it, or it's going to be cost a lot of time and schedule to fix it. And of course, we strive to exceed expectations. So if we can achieve these two things, some of the benefits are a lot of times we'll get repeat customers come back with new technologies or just an advancement on the current product. Or if they don't have any more work for us, a lot of times it's a referral to a new customer for us. So that's how we get more and more clients come to us. Now, what we do to support that clear picture is we manage and report mainly on budget, schedule, and the scope of work, what they want us to go execute. One of the things I've learned in my time as project manager is really understanding the priorities of these three things for each client. Each client has a different set of priorities. I've got clients that want to do, first class, best in the world type of features. So their scope is the most important thing to them. They're willing to spend the extra money. They're willing to delay a product launch just to get the best product that they absolutely can. I've got another customer right now that they're putting their system on a ship that's going to sail in mid-March. So schedule is the most important thing to them. They want the quality. It doesn't have to be perfect. It needs to be good enough, but they're also willing to sacrifice budget. They'll, put another second resource on there or try to get more people working on it just so they can hit their schedule. So I really learned that understanding the priorities of the customer, we need to kind of tailor our management style and what we're helping them achieve based on what their priorities are. And then underneath here is really more the day-to-day management that goes around the office. We talk about walking around the office, talking to the engineers constantly. Not to hide anything from the customer, but we're really looking to keep them away from these details. If they need to get into these details, then we know something's going wrong, right? This is where we're most efficient, just our machine's running by itself. I'll give an example of, resource management. There's going to be time where somebody's working on the project for a month, 2 months, and all of a sudden they have vacation come up or they're sick, or we got a fire drill on another project that we need their expertise for. We're going to have to backfill that resource with somebody else in the company. But we've got checks and balances in place for those things. We do constant reviews of the work and things like that. So if the customer were to get more involved with that, that could lead to inefficiencies and things like that. So we want to keep them, we want to manage well enough where they're not interested in what's going on behind the hood. Again, not to hide things from them, but it's just to keep our efficiency going forward. So I guess in summary, run the project well at the lowest level so that we can report on the right metrics to them clearly, and then they'll have a clear vision into what's going on in the project, and that leads to a successful customer experience. I'm gonna hand it back to Cody for some of his experiences.
So Rupert heard me coin this the other day. I don't, as much as it's a joke, what we're trying to get at here is these are highly complex problems with highly complex technologies, and I'm working with people that are far smarter than I am. So how can you be expected to be the team leader or project leader? I know when I first got here, I guess maybe it was a daunting ask. But I found a few things that have allowed me to successfully lead some projects. And the first of that is integrity, and again, leaning in on these soft skills. So kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, a lot of our clients are emotionally tied to their projects, right? And you want to deliver good news, but you can't always. Sometimes things take longer than expected. We've got some of the brightest minds in the area here, but sometimes problems are just really difficult. An early example of a failure was a specific problem. the information I was receiving was that it was difficult and we were gonna solve it, but it was taking a little bit longer than we had expected. And long story short, we thought we were gonna be able to complete it on schedule and budget, but we didn't raise the flag early enough, or early as we should. So basically that was a come to Jesus moment there for me, that pretty much integrity, if you can be honest, transparent, and sincere in all interactions, that's with the engineers, with the client, then that's 100 times out of 100 always gonna be the right answer. So I found that by doing so, you'll get the mutual respect of the engineer. I'm obviously less experienced than most of the people in the building. I've been in the industry the shortest time. So you really need to operate on some level of mutual respect. And I found that, you know, if you're known as the person that's always gonna tell you the truth, communicate the truth to the customer, then you at least have that going for you. So that was the first step, key principle I found that I can use and, I guess keep in my bag of tricks. And then next is empowerment, and this is something I struggled with as well early. I thought, you know, these people out in the engineering room, they're highly accomplished, they're really smart. If I give them the scope, the schedule, and the budget, then what I will receive back will be what the customer expects. And that's how it should be. I shouldn't micromanage. And I found that that's not necessarily the truth, kind of going back to what Rupert said, it's not necessarily empowerment. That's more hands-off project management. What I found is, you know, developing trust and supporting the engineer is truly empowerment. And that, by support, I mean, you know, if I give you your clear direction, then let me worry about the scope, and the project administrative things, so that you can do what you do best, and that's solve really highly complex problems. You know, if an engineer is spending too much time or more than, I guess, a small amount of time worrying about scope and budget and schedule, then you've done something wrong as a project manager. They should be focusing on fighting the fires and developing the cool products that our clients expect. So that's the second key principle. And then if you've done those two things, then you should be able to foster a culture of accountability. I think if you've developed the mutual respect with the engineer and with your client, and you've developed a culture that allows the engineers to feel empowered and not bothered by some of the overhead and administrative stuff, then you, as a project manager, can truly be hard on that budget, schedule, and quality. Again, the end goal here is to deliver high quality products for our customers on time and schedule. So this is arguably the most important principle that I guess I found to be useful. So yeah, it kind of comes back to that same phrase of humility in what you know. What I'm trying to say here isn't that the project manager doesn't know anything. Oftentimes we're involved in technical brainstorms so that we can at least see what's going on and be an advocate for the client's needs all the way throughout the project. So, you know, we do have an idea of what's going on, but it's truly understanding our role and the role of the engineer. Again, we've defined this well-oiled machine here, which at Device Solutions, which is project managers are team leaders, doing some of the pulling as much work off the engineers as possible without making things inefficient and letting the engineers solve the highly complex problems. So having humility in what you know is knowing that what your roles are as project manager and what you can do to make the engineers better at their job. And then that allows you to be hard on customer deliverables on budget, schedule, quality. So that's what I've learned in my short time here. So with that, I think we'll turn it over for questions.
Wow, thank you so much. That was fantastic. If you're participating online, please feel free to put questions in the chat and I'll read them aloud. But if anyone has any questions in the room, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll ping pong around, answer questions.
Yeah.
And how much do you bring the engineers in with the client meetings? Because if the project manager isn't technically deep, how do you manage that?
So I'll touch on this. So for me, we have regularly a weekly meeting with our client, but depending on the client, we might do, a couple of times a week, 2-3 times a week. But the perfect status meeting, as we call them, is the project manager will start, they'll talk about the schedule where we are, they'll show the budget and where we're at, and then they'll talk about any kind of risk and mitigation. So that should be the first 5 minutes done. The rest of the time then should be spent engineers then detailing with the client, you know, what they're working on and the stuff they found this week. Now that requires, that if you go back to that kind of model that I looked at, where you're like the engineers understanding what the client wants, it's kind of making sure the engineers are aware of where the client is and what they're doing so that they can feed back into the client. Because the way I see it is, you know, one of my projects is a startup. So the guy running it is passionately into the product and really understands what they want. They don't want to hear me kind of giving a kind of, as I call it, like a Rupert version of engineering, which is very low level. They want to hear the engineer that's building it saying, this is what we found and this is what we're doing. And then when you build a really good relationship with your client, your engineer can say, this doesn't work, but this is what we're doing about it. Now that has implications when you're talking to your engineers. I had a conversation with the engineer where they're like, no, we'll say no to the client. And then the other engineer will say, well, we'll say no, but to the client. I was like, well, let's say yes, but to the client. And you can do that, but it can do that. So you're then managing kind of that detail with the bigger picture. But if you work this properly and you empower your engineers to understand what the client's building, so we're not just building a circuit board, even though when you're sat there at your desk, you know, coming up with a schematic and designing this, you might just see the circuit board. If you can kind of look away and look out and see what the client wants, then you can then sit in that meeting as an engineer and say, actually, I know if I put an antenna here, it's going to affect the housing that I'm putting this device into. And therefore you can then have the engineers speaking directly to the client and saying that this is your design, and then you go forward. And you can take it a step further where we can partner with the other partners that the customer's using, and then we can interact with them away from the customer and then come back to the customer and go, hey, we've already deconflicted for you. We've solved this problem with your other partners. Are you happy for us to go? And then you're kind of then just taking those levels of stress off the client and giving them solutions. So ideally, the engineer should do most of the talking in those meetings.
A question online, and then we'll, great presentation. I think that project management is often overlooked. I'm curious on how you approach risk assessment at various levels of development and planning.
I think at the start of the project, one of the first things we do is, as part of the proposal, we assess risk. And then, you know, we rate the risk of how likely it is to happen and what the impacts would be. And as we burn those risks down, we're constantly monitoring from week to week, really, what the risks are. We have a internal team meeting once a week to talk about the state of the project, what the new risks are. If a client comes back with new scope or changed scope, we need to analyze that risk. So it's really ongoing throughout the project.
Another rule we have with risk is, sorry, Tony, another rule we have with risk is no surprises. So as we start seeing these things emerge, you know, you think about steering the ship and the iceberg, kind of as we start seeing in the distance, it's highlighting to that client early about, right, this is the risk in the future and this is what we're going to do. And another thing we do is once we've done a feasibility study, we then review our estimate that we've given to the customer. And by reviewing our estimate, we can then say, hey, this is the risk we found by doing our feasibility. As we understand more, this is then how we're going to proceed. So I think it's just being open and transparent as you go.
Yeah, and part of assessing risk also is we have potential customers come to us with ideas that we have seen in the past that we think perhaps they don't know what they have. So part of us assessing risk well, do you really think that you have the best dog tracker on the planet when we've seen hundreds of dog trackers where perhaps the uniqueness that they bring is a really unique algorithm to help predict where a dog may go or may be. So understanding what their real requirements are before we actually engage and start taking their money from a project perspective and risk putting that potential customer in danger for losing their money or losing their investment. And one of the nice tools that we have available to us is referring them back to the Riot Accelerator program to help them understand what is their business model, what is their value proposition, who are their customers, who are their partners, and really hone in on that before actually engaging with development partners like us. And that, like these guys are saying, builds trust, builds integrity, builds repeat business, and makes us all more successful in the long run.
Shameless plug for the Riot Accelerator program. We have applications for our carry cohort opening March 1st. So there you go.
And we've referred, because when we have people come into us, we've referred them to the accelerator program, and then they've come back to us with a much, much better definition of what they actually need us to develop. And it really helps develop long-term relationships.
Awesome. Thank you. Question.
Yeah, I was gonna build on Scott's comment, but I'll build on Tony's. to what extent really your project management and your engineers are involved with pre-sale, particularly for new clients? So that you know, and kind of what your criteria is for assessing, is it a good fit at all for you? Do you ever say, not just go to the right accelerator, but maybe, no, this is just, we just don't fit here. But to what extent are your engineers involved in project manager leadership involvement, helping you with your pre-sale and new client acquisition?
Sure. So our CEO is right around the corner, Chris Lamb. He's well connected in the industry, as are a lot of us. We've been in the industry for over 30 years. And we have a lot of partners that we refer business to if it's not in our wheelhouse, if we think it would help foster a good relationship with all of us down the road. If we are resource constrained at the moment and don't have the ability to meet their schedule. So we'll often refer them to our partners, which again, builds good relationships with us and our partners. So.
Okay. So you don't let your sales process drive everything. You really make sure it's a fit.
That's right. We try to make sure that it's a fit for all parties going forward to ensure success.
Right.
Exactly right.
And part of that also links into kind of how we manage change. And when we're going down these roads and when partners are then evolving their products or coming to us with different ideas, then the engineer team that works on that is critical at coming up with that estimate and coming up with that process and working there. We can really get hand in glove with the client and improve their products. And as we go, so once we kind of, it's the classic, we'll bring a new device in, we'll come up with an estimate, but then as we work on that, things change. And part of that also is how we manage that change and really bring our engineers in to own the kind of estimate that we do and how we do that as well.
That's actually, I used to part of years ago in a paging infrastructure, and we used to compete very well against Motorola because they did all their pre-sales and business development through a specific sales guy.
Yeah.
We bring our engineers to the meetings,
And
it made a world of difference to sell our competency.
And what's great about this company is where we are small, we can, the CEO, Chris, at the back there can walk in to talk to the expert directly and be like, hey, we're looking at this, can you work this out? And it really is kind of a whole team effort as we go through.
And also to that point, there are instances when we'll have engineers and PMs go out to networking events and things like that. Like I know our world-class system tester killed it at the Riot demo night. He was out there talking to potential clients and I guess just all those interested in IoT. So we're not afraid to have engineers go out and learn a little bit. And, they're the ones that'll be developing it. So we think it makes sense for them to talk about it as well, especially at the pre-sale phase. I know some clients come in here and ask for specific engineers that they've worked with in the past. So we pull in engineers as early as possible, as early as it makes sense.
Can I follow up?
Please.
You ever have a problem, or put it positive? What do you do to encourage the customer to have the right persons on their team to work with you?
So that's a big one because it's a difficult one to manage. And one thing we try to do is develop that relationship so that we're not just putting the right people in front of the customer, but the customer's providing the right thing back. And that often comes into complexities when you're working with a customer that is highly technical, because you need to make sure you've got the right people in their technical teams to speak. And I'm sure all of us here who've had project manager experience, the other thing is targeting the right decision makers so that we can move decisions that we need to be made on quickly. And I think part of that as well, and I say it regularly to the team, is if you partner with us, we as the project managers our clients should feel like we're part of their team, not that we're a separate contractor that they use and they go to. And that's why I say kind of we are the small vital part of something bigger. And if we can feel like that's kind of a whole circle effort rather than just a plug that we plugged into, then it becomes much easier to have an open and honest conversation with your client saying, and sometimes this is where you can come in as a project manager and kind of add that kind of higher level, be like, hey, our engineers are talking to you guys, but it'd be really good if we could chat to kind of the guys in this department. Can we bring one of those into a meeting? And as you develop that kind of communication structure that Cody says, kind of as it starts, it is quite transactional in like, the team talks to the project manager talks to the engineers, but then kind of as you get 2-3 weeks into the project, the engineers speak up more and then you develop that closer relationship. And the closer we can build the relationships with the clients, the easier it is to say, hey, you guys have got potentially the wrong people on this. Can we talk to this department? Because we'll unlock this problem quicker.
Also, we meet multiple times per week to evaluate the resource allocation, make sure that we've got the people with correct skill set. apply to the correct projects. So I'd say that's one of our better methods for making sure that we're giving the client the best match for their needs.
In the slide with the project process, it showed manufacturing as the last step. Is that something that Device Solutions gets engaged with, selecting contract manufacturers and pushing it down the line?
I think we help with that process. We don't manufacture ourselves or contract directly, but we can refer you to contractors. We often help with manufacturing testers and things like that. So we're well versed in that process where we can definitely help and benefit the client.
And for,
Often part of the project will involve us acting as the consulting resources to represent our customer to the contract manufacturer. So that's part of what we offer as well. As Cody well knows.
yeah, we have some contract manufacturers that we work with directly for our own internal projects, so we're familiar with the process, and Tony's been working with them for many years, and so we know some of the struggles that our clients run into, so we're pretty equipped to speak to consult on how you can navigate that process.
And we'll plug in and consult on each of these kind of phases of a project as well.
Any other questions from the folks online? And while we're waiting, please feel free to put them in the chat, but a question that I have is like the history of IoT and what is IoT has definitely shifted over the past 10 years and more. And as somebody who did not have a technical background in coming into this field, how do you all work with both the client who may have a highly technical background or may not, and advise them on ultimately an end result and a successful product? And like part one of that question, but then part two is like, and then at what stage of their company development, of their product development, of whatever, do you all work with them? Is it, they've developed an MVP and you're mass scaling, or are you before, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we'll start with part one on the IoT part. So when we were first getting into doing IoT projects, it was not plug and play nearly as close as it is today, where different parts of the ecosystem have been aggregated to make an IoT end-to-end solution a far easier task from a plug and play perspective. So from the beginning, we built out an end-to-end system ourselves, engaging partners, doing development ourselves, bringing pieces of the entire end-to-end ecosystem together. As a matter of fact, this is one of the lunch and learns that we did with Riot. Feel free to contact Jen and look that one up. But it really depends on our relationships, our skill set for one thing, and then our relationships that we built over the years that provide different parts of the end-to-end ecosystem. For example, we have a great partner named Tago.io who does the data management and hosting of data and dashboard presentation visualization, and they do the interface to AWS. So we are not staffed or scaled to continue to manage that portion of the IoT ecosystem. So we either engage Tago as our partner as part of our team for that particular project, or if it's isolated enough where the customer can meet their needs because they only need to have the middleware and visualization component, we'll refer the business to Tago. So having been a part of the entire development of the IoT ecosystem, we're well positioned to either take it on ourselves, engage partners, or pass it over to partners that are part of the ecosystem. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Chris, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, for the second part, the answer is early and often, right? So it's way better to come to us early before you fix bad parts, before you fail certification. We've had plenty of people come to us from the labs that are doing FCC certs. And the lab says, okay, you passed FCC, but what's your plan for carrier certification? And that was the first time they thought about it. And of course, in any product development cycle, they're already, a year late at that point, and they just found out there's a new hurdle that they're another year from meeting. So engaging early and often is key. And in terms of how we work with different customers, we have everybody from the startup at the back of the napkin to Iridium and 3M. So we just adapt to where they are and what technical skills and resources they have, and try to get their product to market or their MVP to market or in front of investors, whatever they need.
Awesome.
The estimates and the predictions for IoT expansion in the industry have often been undermet. Do you guys have any insights into why the IoT market isn't expanding like people thought it would?
It's hard and it takes lots of batteries. I mean, a real end-to-end solution, if you wanna have something, especially it's sold through any kind of hierarchy, you know. 3M sells to distributors, who sells to resellers, who sells to regional markets, who sells to a store. The guy at the store needs to track the stuff he did and all the way up and through, maintain service, turn things on and off, provision, security. If you're a company that makes some stuff, learning all that IT from the lowest level, low power device like we do, to running a Twitter scaled cloud like we did for Brightfield, it's just not practical.
Yeah.
And then you need 1 million batteries.
No, I had one more piece to that too, is that at the very end, the end user component, is that oftentimes having the distribution channels and the skills in a particular vertical limit people. So we've developed a super smart, cheap way to measure grain bin in a sensor. However, for us to be able to go out to talk to every farmer, to every mill, to every hog producer, every chicken producer, we don't travel in that skill set. So we engage partners who are smart within that vertical to take this unique solution, this unique IoT solution that we built and enabling platform that we built, to give them a tool in their toolbox, like a distributor, to go out and engage these people who they are familiar with the distribution channels, who owns the money, who actually can use this for their benefit for the entire ROI, for the entire solution. So that's another part. It's really difficult to realize your place in the ecosystem and when you need to engage partners to take on that responsibility. So that's a very unique skill.
It sounds like you're saying that there's just a lot of people that have to be involved to pull this whole thing off,
There are.
more so than other industries.
It's not plug and play. It's not as plug and play as you think it is. So there's a lot of engagement that has to occur.
Awesome. One last question.
Tony, maybe for you too. Given it's not plug and play, but it's getting much easier, if you will, to integrate the pieces.
Yep.
Are you seeing any improvement in sort of the pilot level failure rates? Because IoT pilots have been failing a lot at all levels. Are you seeing any improvement in pilots being more successful these days more often? No?
I don't think we have any data, we don't necessarily see enough of them to say.
I'll add that as somebody who does work in that field, it's been interesting, recently, as you see more, products deployed in the market, the, interference between the pilot projects, whether you deploy a sensor on a water tower, and then 2 years later, a apartment building goes up in front of that water tower, well, that's creating interference. And those projects in that pilot period are like, well, like, crap, why did my solution stop working? Or that sort of thing.
Yeah. And it's often a race to zero for certain components. Like you'll hear a lot of folks, look, we'll sell you a module that gives you 2 meg a month and a device that checks in once a day and gives you a 5-year battery life for 2 cents. You know, that's one piece of the ecosystem. Right. So to your question, part of it is understanding that race to zero is on an individual component within the end-to-end solution. You need to have the big picture. So a lot of failures come from a misunderstanding of that.
I think instead of pilots, there are a lot of things just being rolled out, but nobody talks about Amazon Sidewalk.
Oh, yeah.
But it's there, right? You look at the map, it's everywhere. It's going to be used for something sometime. It's just being built into things. It's sort of like what happened with internet in your phone. 2003, when Tony and I had some early camera phones, people said, why do I want a camera? They really did ask us that. And in 2012, it was a pilot. Nobody's trying this, nobody's testing out, it's just taken for granted. And that's the way it's gonna be, like Amazon Sidewalk or whatever.
Yeah.
You mentioned sidewalk, which helium and LoRa in the US in the days of
I don't know.
Amazon Sidewalk.
We'll see. I think that Sidewalk has the whole data usage challenge.
Yeah.
So there'll be a lot of people who aren't comfortable with that.
Mhm.
And helium seems to have hit enough critical mass to have maybe.
Well, Thank you all very much for a wonderful presentation. Cody, what's the best way for folks to get in contact with Device Solutions?
I'll say we have a LinkedIn page that Colleen does a great job of running. Maybe we drop the link in the chat, and that's probably the best way to get a look at us as a company.
Okay, awesome. I will definitely drop that for the folks in participating online in my follow-up email to make sure that you all are able to connect, and everyone who attended here today are able to connect with Device Solutions. As a reminder for everyone, Riot hosts weekly lunch and learns on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern time, and you can find a list of those upcoming lunch and learns on our website and meetup groups. This event was recorded, and so we will be posting it to Riot's YouTube page and sharing it out. Thank you all so very much for joining today, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank you very much.